I am looking back at some memories with my grandmother that makes me realize what an evil human being she was. And throughout my childhood and even into some of my adulthood, I looked at her like she was the best thing since sliced bread. Like I adored her. And the reality is that when memories start to not emerge, these weren't repressed memories that I had, but fall into a different light, and I look back on them now, I realize that she was actually a pretty vile human being, maybe even worse than my mother. So I'm going to give you a trigger warning because I'm going to talk about CSA. So if you need to scroll on by or shut this down, now's your time to do so. My grandmother facilitated the abuse that my grandfather perpetrated against me. My grandmother would invite me into the room for a love up, as she would call it, for a cuddle, and give me all that safe and fuzzy feeling of love. And then she would turn away and the abuse would happen. I never looked at that in that way. Like I never realized what she was doing at that time until over a year ago, where something clicked in and I looked back at that memory and I went, oh my goodness, all those times she was setting it up. My grandmother referred to me as his favorite. Guess who else his favorite was? My other main abuser, my mother. And when my grandmother would talk about my mother as being his favorite, it was laced with like this venom, like this, like, oh, she was his favorite. And she was jealous of it. You could tell. And that memory has never changed. Like I looked at that in childhood and I could tell that my grandmother hated my mother. And by contrast, that she adored me, which is how that memory never quite fell into place the way that it has now, because I always felt in my childhood this incredible warmth from my grandmother. I remember I used to love her perfume, which now would make me absolutely puke my guts out. I used to watch her getting ready. Like she was so soft and oh my gosh, and she was so nice to me. And in front of my mother, she would be like the grandmother of the year. She would treat me in such a way, like dote on me. She was everything you would think a grandmother would be. And now I look back at that and I kind of remember her sort of looking at my mother at times when she was doing that doting thing or speaking highly of me or, oh, she did the cutest thing today kind of stuff. And my mother's face. And I could see my mother's face looking much the way I'm sure mine did when my mother was doing that with my children, with my daughter, showing me that she could love a little girl, just not this little girl. My grandmother did exactly the same thing. The difference is when I saw that happening, I knew how damaging it was and I went no contact with my mother. But for me, I grew up in that until I ran away from home at the age of 13, running from all of that abuse. And I ended up living homeless on the streets as a result of it. My grandmother, I know now, when she was doing that whole doting thing, she knew that my mother was going to come down on me harder. Like I know that my grandmother was also setting that. I know my grandmother was also setting the stage, setting up that abuse, setting up my mother to be angry with me. And do you know why? Because then I would have to run to her for consolation. That is what a narcissistic family system looks like. That is what children who are growing up being abused in a narcissistic family system looks like. The ones that we think are good are actually the fire starters. They're the ones who are setting the scene so that you need and love and adore them. And they're using that to hurt their own children, your actual parent. A lot of times we go through our healing journey and we elevate the other abusers because they were nice, like my grandmother was to me. Until we really heal from the main abuser, we don't get a clear vision of what the whole scenery was like what it really looked like. And once you start to have that perspective, you mourn those other relationships less because of the fact that you realize how complicit or actual abusers those other people were. And that's why it's important to address each loss individually, but also do it with the clearest vision possible to make it easier to heal from those situations. If this video was helpful for you, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to my page and like it. And if you need additional support, I want to let you know that I am a therapist for survivors of narcissistic family systems, and that I also offer amazing group therapies that is basically like being here on video, but you're with other people who are going through the same things that you are. And instead of having a comment section, I guide you through a healing process and exercises and things that we've all dealt with, things you're currently dealing with in order to help you heal. So if you are looking for any help, or maybe there's a video topic you'd like me to cover, leave it in the comment section. And in the comment section is where you can find information on how to get in touch with me directly. I wish you well on your healing journey, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of it.